Okay, so in this lecture, we're going to talk about organizing and outlining your speech. This should follow along with Chapter 9 in your textbook. So you can look in there and see what they have to say. Also, if you go on Canvas, you can go into the File section. And in the File section, you'll see a folder labeled Outlines. For the two research speeches, which is the informative speech and the persuasion speech, you have to use outlines. We don't develop manuscripts. We only deliver speeches extemporaneously from outlines. Therefore, you can find a speaking outline and a preparation outline. For the informative speech, you'll have to have both the preparation outline and the speaking outline, and you should deliver your speech from the speaking outline. And then for the persuasion speech, all you got to have is the speaking outline. So a little bit easier. So let's jump right into organizing and outlining. So, whenever you're putting together your information, you have to think strategically. As a speaker, you want to think like the audience. If I were the audience, how would I want to hear this information? So, once you've determined what needs to happen, you create, when we call that strategic organization. So developing a kind of a pattern that you think is important that would make your speech be the most effective. So, creating that is a key to having an effective speech. So, you have critical thinking, which you use to decipher, like, I have all this information, what do I do to get that information into a working order? And then once you get the information that you're going to use, so for example, in the informative speech, you have to have 8 external sources. Once you get those external sources, then you determine what organizational pattern am I going to use. Now, you've talked about organizational patterns before in Comp 1 and Comp 2, when you talk about things like putting things in chronological order or spatial order, or based on categories, and of course in speech we call that primary and recency. So we kind of look at those and how those work, and that's what that strategic organization is and how that works. Now, I like to use a concept, the idea when your book talks about this, simplicity. Simplicity is the key to a good speech. You don't want to make it too complicated. And if you can keep it simple, and you practice the KISS practice, which is keep it simple, stupid, then everything should work out just fine, especially when it comes to the organizing and outlining part. So try to keep things almost short. I mean, you don't want to get too complex and too crazy. I had a student one time that did a speech on black holes and how a black hole actually works. And you would think this is a very complicated subject matter, but he kept it simple. He broke it down, an organizational pattern that were by categories and how things worked, and it worked out great. Everybody understood it, and everything was super. For the informative speech, what we do is we try to keep things to like 3 to 4 main points, and that usually helps out with putting things together. We also, as we'll talk about when we organize them, the order of those main points is really important, and we always are concentrating on balance. In your textbook, they talk about balance, and I hope you guys would read that section. It's really important, and it can come in handy, especially with these 2 research speeches. So next thing we'll look at are some of the more common patterns that we have. That's an update. And we're just going to hit cancel. That was perfect that it happened right in the middle of this lecture. So these are just some of the simple patterns that you've used before. You got chronological order and spatial order. Chronological, of course, is a time sequence. Spatial is where things are in relation to other things. So, for example, if you were talking about Disney World, you could talk about, for example, I always think of Magic Kingdom whenever I think of spatial. And I think of, like, Cinderella's castle sits in the middle of the Magic Kingdom, and then all the other like worlds or whatever like kind of are surround it. And you could talk about that and how that works. And that's a good organizational pattern to use for a speech if you're talking about the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. Causal deals with cause and effect and how things work that way. You, of course, explain the causes and how they work, and then the effects of those causes, things that happen as a product of the cause. Problem solution, same format. Problem solution and cause and effect are 2 good ones for persuasion speeches. But the thing to always remember is you always want to fully explain what the problem is. A lot of times people will jump straight to the solution. You want to make sure you explain what the problem is, and then people kind of understand the solution, and it makes it more effective. And the last thing, of course, is categorical, and that's also breaking things down like based on topics. And once you break those down in those different groups, then you see that you can also break them down even further, and you can determine, hey, which one is the most important? And we call that primacy. Which one's the most important? Maybe I should put that one first, or maybe I should put that one last, and depending on how you want to do that. And then, of course, which one is the most recent? That could be, you may start with the most recent, you may end with the most, it just depends on how you want to do it. So recency is another thing that's really important. We also have 4 other that your book talks about. Those first 5 are the ones that are really probably the most popular, and then these 4 are ones that your book talks about, which I think these are pretty good organizational patterns to look at. The first one, of course, is comparative, a great one for speaking to inform, because in this one it compares 2 things. It doesn't have you determine which one's better than the other, it's just comparing like how things work, or like, for example, the book uses comparing New York City and London, and how those 2 big major cities kind of work hand in hand, how they're structured. Sequential deals with sequence, exactly how to do things, like a process. They use, for example, in your book, they talk about CPR, baking a cake. If you ever bake a cake, you see on the back of the box, it tells you sequential order of how to actually accomplish something. So, of course, that's to inform. Refutive. When we talk about this is a great persuasive one, and this is one where you want to say, like, yours is better than somebody else's. So, for example, I have a student right now in my persuasion section of one of my classes. She is persuading people, like, why a certain politician is not a good politician and how they're corrupt. So she's refuting the claim that this person is a good person. So she's going to say how they're bad. Now, if somebody wanted to go back, they could refute her order and say that she was bad. So that's just a good debate approach to organizational patterns. And the last one is the narrative approach. And you guys did that in your personal narrative. And so that's just basically it's telling a story. And that's an organizational pattern that's commonly used as well. So we have main points. And main points should stand out. They should really be easy to identify. And when we identify main points in our speech, we identify main points by using Roman numerals. Now, Roman numeral 1 is always going to be the introduction, and there's no need to ever identify the introduction. We know that when we see Roman numeral 1, that right after that, it's going to be the attention getter. Like Roman numeral 1 is always the attention getter, and Roman numeral 2 is always going to be the first main point. So, and we always identify them that way. Now, subpoints, which is your supporting material, are always going to be capital letters, and they're going to be indented 1 space. So, for example, here is what it would look like. So notice that I've started off with a startling fact to get my audience's attention, because when you tell people are going to die, usually people really start to pay attention. I then indent 1 space, and I put my first subpoint as a capital letter A. Now, as you learned in Comp 1 and Comp 2, if you have an A, you have to have a B, and you can have a C. Now, I would like for you to label your transitions, and your first transition, the first major transition in any speech, is the central idea. Notice in my speech, you can clearly see where I have a specific purpose statement, which is B, and then my central idea is my first transition sentence. I even have supporting material from rei.com. So even if I were to read this, I could have supporting material. In this introduction, just right here, I've got 2 pieces of external sources that are used in it. And this is what I'm looking for in your speeches. So make sure that you do that. And by saying things like according to National Geographic or according to rei.com, those work. That's an easy way to talk about a periodical and an easy way to talk about a website. You don't have to put 3 dubs in there. You can just say the .com, and that works as well. So we talk about connectives. That central idea is the first major connective, and connectives are what help us move from one point to the next. They help kind of tie everything together. Transitions, you guys use transition sentences in Comp 1 and Comp 2. We have those in public speaking too, and those are really important because they allow the audience to kind of know where things are. One of the big signposts that we use, of course, is when you use the term like in conclusion, that's a signpost. It's a simple word or phrase that lets an audience know that, hey, it's almost the end of the speech. We have internal previews and internal summaries. Previews let the audience know what's coming up, kind of like the central idea, let us know what's coming up, and an internal summary lets the audience know what you've talked about. Now, remember that in your conclusion, you're going to rephrase the central idea in past tense. Therefore, that's going to be an internal summary. And so, for example, in my speech today, I have discussed, and see, I've used it in past tense, and that works. Okay, so some things with the outlines, which you'll see. You guys saw those examples that I have on Canvas in that Canvas section. If you haven't, you should look at that. A prep outline is 2 full pages. It's really detailed. It's got a lot of information in it. And then the speaking outline is no more than 1.5 pages. It's a lot shorter. I want you to learn from that preparation outline, and then I want you to deliver from the speaking outline, which is important. You got to have a works cited page, which is on a separate sheet of paper, and you can put it together with the preparation outline, so they should all be in one document there. And you should use the MLA format in putting together your sources for your 8 external sources in that works cited page. Make sure you follow the correct format for the MLA for the works cited page, because I will be grading you on that. There is no need to put the words like, I know that Roman numeral 1 is the introduction. You don't need to label introduction, body, conclusion. That's not necessary. You may see that in the book, but the reason the book's doing that is because they're trying to teach you that those 3 separate parts. And I've already established what those 3 parts are, so there's no need to put them in the outlines. So a couple little reminders, kind of just things that I'm kind of looking for. A lot of this deals with people that are in class, but I think they still would work with you guys. The preparation outline has got all your source material in it. Make sure that you have it in there. Speaking outline is generally going to be keywords, direct quotes. You can paraphrase different information. If you want to handwrite little information in there, that's fine with me too. I don't have a problem with that. It's a working document for you in the speaking. I just don't want it to go past 1.5 pages. I do not want you to read to me. Never ever use bullet points. Bullet points are not what we're looking at. I know I used it in this PowerPoint, but we don't do those in our outlines. It's a real pet peeve of mine. Make sure the works cited page is in MLA format. Make sure you turn your information in on time. Of course, yours has to be typed because nobody's going to scan that and put that in. And remember, for the informative speech, you got to have 8 sources. For the persuasion speech, which is the next one, which is next week, you got to have 10 sources. So, all right, so that's really it for organizing and outlining. If you guys have any questions, you can always email me, and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I possibly can.